York Times editorial board endorses Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar.
Team Rising is here, of course. We're joined by Maximilian Alvarez. He's host of the Working People podcast, and former Georgia Congressman Jack Kingston. He's surrogate for the President Trump's re-election campaign. Two friends of the show.
Great to see you guys.
Thanks.
So, I mean, everybody was abuzz this weekend after the New York Times revealed to us finally who they're going to endorse. It's going to be Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren. I mean, there's just so much to break down here, Max. First of all, isn't the point of an endorsement to pick somebody instead of being like, oh no, we really endorse the two, strong women on both sides? So they literally just refuse to take a position. But it's also just like such a stupid way to go about it.
It is like against all odds. The New York Times endorsement managed to be even dumber than we were all expecting.
Anticipating.
It's really mind blowing, and really, I commend them for it. And the New York Times just really doesn't get it. They really don't get the stakes of our political moment, right? I mean, the condescending self-importance of this entire dog and pony show, which they strategically engineered to resemble like some reality show reveal, right? Is just astounding. And the thing that gets me is that at a moment when the two most popular politicians in this country, on the left and on the right, are tapping into just this real, justified, and materially grounded populist rage against the institutions that have aided and abetted the system that is screwing them over. Who thinks that we care about this paneled boardroom of elitist dweebs who imagine themselves to be the ideological tastemakers of the unwashed masses?
Right. Exactly. But their readers are not part of that boiling anger, and that's what this comes down to. It's basically pandering to their mostly white, affluent readership.
It really is interesting as they denounce Trump for being white nativist. I've never heard the term. I'm sure it's something that I'm guilty of since I'm a Trump supporter. But here they go. They ignore Yang. They have a passing comment about Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, but then they go white, and they embrace it boldly. Though, I do want to say, Max got the good question I wanted to jump on. My daughter worked for a company called Research in Motion. Does the name ring a bell?
Yeah, BlackBerry.
Yeah, okay. Now, did I stump the others? That's what I want to know. Nobody's heard of Research. Nobody's heard of Research in Motion. Nobody has a BlackBerry anymore, even though they cornered the market on early smartphones, but they had two presidents. It was a Canadian company, and they thought they could survive on two presidents. That indecision, I think, led to their demise. It's the same thing with the New York Times.
That's right.
They're too wussy to pick one and say, let's just go ahead with it. As you're saying, Amy, Crystal, I'm thinking of Amy.
Oh, no.
I don't know. Actually, I'm thinking of a book.
We're friends here, Jack. Don't screw it up.
I'm thinking about Amy Dole with Best Guest Media, so a little plug for her. But it's kind of like a middle school dance. Doesn't matter what happens as long as I'm the center of attention. That's what the New York Times is doing.
That's the funny part about it, is that these people purport to speak for us all. They want to be the paper of record. They want to report things out factually. I mean, we've debunked millions of their factual, so-called fact reporting here on the show, Max. But it's interesting because they claim to speak for the diversity, right? I talked about this in my monologue today. They're like, about racism. These are the most race-obsessed people on the country. They have a so-called diverse board, but they're not actually diverse whenever it comes to their class or whenever it comes to their interests. And I played a clip during my monologue about this working class black woman in the elevator who meets Joe Biden, and she's like, I love you, and he takes a picture with her. They'll never understand the politics of that person. I'm not saying, you're not a Joe Biden supporter, but you can understand why somebody like that would want it, and they don't reflect that in their endorsement, do they?
No, they don't. And I mean, honestly, I don't think working people give a crap about this endorsement. Right? The endorsements that I care about
them, not about what it would actually impact.
Yeah, the endorsements that I care about are National Nurses United, the United Electrical, Radio, and Machine Workers of America, American Postal Workers Union of New Hampshire, United Teachers of Los Angeles, who I had on my show Working People last year during their strike. These are the unions that have endorsed Bernie Sanders. And, I take way more stock in those endorsements than I do in this dog and pony show. And also, aside from the form of this endorsement, which, as we all seem to agree, was ridiculous and self-serving. The actual substance of the endorsement is trash. Right? It is just dripping with the same, politely vicious neoliberal claptrap that, you know, like has led the New York Times to support literally every U.S. war for the last 4 decades.
Yeah, right.
And like the thing that also blows my mind, right, is that the New York Times editorial board, like no one expected them to endorse Bernie. They knew that. Bernie knew that.
He doesn't
We
call
all
them
knew
on their
that.
birthday, so that was.
He doesn't call them on their
there.
birthday. Big no-no, right? And you know, like the thing that really gets me is, and that just really highlights kind of the elitist self-unawareness of all this, right? Is that they paint Bernie as this kind of unrealistic, demagogic figure. They even compare him to Trump in that endorsement, as opposed to someone like Klobuchar. Klobuchar is painted as like the realistic, you know, like non-fringe element. Bernie is painted as fringe, and these editors are saying that the rest of us idiots need to support the like, you know, slice of bread who's polling at 2%. Like how fringe, isn't that fringe?
Eating salad with a fork is a very mainstream.
And they talk about her in terms of the minor issues, and I don't mean unimportant issues, but increasing the minimum wage isn't the top tier issue. It's a solid issue, but it's a base hit. It's not the home run. It's not the big ideal. The same way with addiction assessment. Nobody. Oh, who's the addiction assessment?
I don't agree with that. I actually think those economic issues are really central. But what did you make of the Bernie-Trump comparison, as you're coming from the other side of that? I mean, did you think that was fair or apt? And then once again, they just call Bernie divisive and, you know, disliked, when in fact he's the most popular senator in the country.
Just to put that in perspective, what they say about Bernie is they're like, Trump is uncompromising and a demagogic figure. And I mean, you know, the counter is that they're two of the most popular politicians on the left and the right. So maybe people want a demagogic figure who's upset with the system.
I think what we learned on the campaign trail in 2016 is that the two most authentic candidates there were, and I'm talking about in early stage, really were Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. And this editorial does point out that many of the issues that Bernie Sanders has been pushing for years, which seemed radical today, are center stage and things that people talk about. So, you know, and saying he's too old, you know, 7-year difference between him and Elizabeth Warren, maybe those 7 years are that critical, but I just don't think it was genuine at all. Bernie Sanders and his following, 2 million donors who've given 5 million different times. That's pretty serious in terms of it. But I have to say one other thing as a conservative, when they say that Klobuchar is a moderate, they're all for gun control. They're all for more government intervention and control of health care. They're all for open borders. She's for amnesty. So to me, you know, maybe those things are now moderate positions. I don't think so.
Culturally, I don't disagree with you. It's much more about on the economics. But I think one interesting other point there, Max, was whenever Bernie was asked about, are Trump voters all racist? And he got vilified by a lot of the neoliberal centrist press on that, saying, oh, Bernie's just apologizing for racist Trump voters. And Bernie made the case. He said, look, if you've been destroyed by trade policy, you can't afford your health premiums, and all these other things that the bipartisan establishment has for 40 years, it's not crazy to think that you might vote for somebody who's actually speaking to those concerns. I wanted to get your perspective on that, since you're also coming from the left.
Right. And I mean, I guess the two things that I would want to say is, one, you know, going back to what you were saying before, right, about the working class black woman and how, you know, like the perspective of working people kind of translates or doesn't to this, you know, New York Times endorsement, right? I mean, the fact of the matter is that, you know, working people, sorry, hold on. I just had like a total.
No, you're all good.
Fine.
I mean, I think the whole thing, the real thing that's very interesting about this is that they don't seem to understand why anybody could want to vote against the system, and that's what they said about Trump.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, I got it for a second, so I want to get it in. Is that like, you know, the thing that my brain has actually broken from all of this, right? But I mean, like, you know, the elephant in the room is that, like, you know, the open secret is that Klobuchar is, like, you know, vicious to her workers, right? I mean, like, so
per the New York Times report.
Yeah.
That the New York Times reported on, right?
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to register in my head, and I didn't have, like, it did a do not compute because the irony is so rich and dripping. And you know, like, I don't care about what this boardroom of people who are part of an institution that is endorsing and reporting on, you know, like a person who is this vicious to their workers. I don't think that they know anything really about, like, what, you know, what is really driving kind of working people's political motivations in this moment. Not only Trump supporters, but also just the millions of people who didn't vote in the last election.
Vote. That's really what it is.
And you know, we talk about this on my show, Working People, all the time. The very first episode was with my dad, a Mexican immigrant who grew up dirt poor, who lost everything in the recession, who voted for Trump, right? I mean, I've had to talk with him and wrestle with that, but I know firsthand from our family experiences that there are many reasons why people will feel, and people felt in 2016, like they had, you know, no other recourse except to either stay home or take a gamble on a guy who
well, and guess what?
the important point.
Holding people in contempt, not a great way to win them back. It's kind of simple. Gentlemen, stick with us.
Stick with us, guys.
Team Rising.
Thank you.
Right after this.